That's why I think this game against TCU maybe is the perfect opportunity for Kansas to get right. We talked about getting a win. This matchup against TCU maybe kind of lines up for KU to be able to do that, because when you look at the offensive side of the ball for Kansas and the defensive side of the ball for TCU, obviously we know about KU struggles offensively with Jalen Daniels, with Jeff Grimes and the play calling. They tried switching it up, doing some different things. And TCU's running defense is almost as bad as its rushing offense. They have been terrible in stopping the run on the other side of the ball. And so this is a game where if you're looking for an opportunity for Kansas to maybe get right offensively, this might be it, because you're going to have the chance to feed Devin Neal and Daniel Highshaw and establish the run game against a TCU defense that has proven to be porous. And that can only serve to help Jalen Daniels if he has a complementary run game. And then maybe he can make those couple throws that can get him going and really spark this Kansas offense. Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible. Paid all who enter. Beware this podcast. That's right, it's this paid podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer. I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. As always, we are brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe, especially on our YouTube channel. We post other video content there, including some clips with Lance Leipold and some players as well throughout the week. So head over to our Kansas Jayhawks KCSN YouTube channel, like, subscribe, leave us 5-star rating and review if you're listening on the audio platform as well. Helps us grow our channel, and tell people about us, because we're awesome and we're here covering KU. So you can also join in on the conversation with us by leaving a comment on our YouTube or by texting in to the KCSN hotline powered by Mint Mobile at 913-407-6524. That's 913-407-6524 to join in on the conversation with us. Ask us anything about KU, about, how close I was jumping off a cliff after the West Virginia game, so on and so forth. So before we get the podcast started, Kevin, I do think I should also mention that I've been in contact with my agent, and I was told that my NIL partnership that I was verbally committed to for Payheed they didn't cash my check. So I may be taking a redshirt season now the rest of this year. I may be sitting out to take a redshirt because I think that I deserve more money. So
it's kind of funny how that happened with Matt Sluka after he played KU.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. I saw some KU fans saying, "Man, why couldn't he have done this before the KU game? Like, KU might have had a chance to win." So just wanted to clear the air on that. I'm going to be taking a red shirt and looking for more money somewhere else. So how about that? Take that. Crazy story. Absolutely wild story that unfolded on Wednesday afternoon, really Wednesday morning into Wednesday, with this back and forth. And I think it speaks to sort of the true wild, wild west of NIL. And I've kind of always felt that, the NCAA for years and years was just blasted, ripped as this terrible organization that was toothless, that didn't do anything. They're useless, right? And I think the NCAA decided with NIL, all right, fine, do whatever the hell you want. And I just get this sense that the NCAA is hoping that at some point these conferences and, colleges at large across college athletics come together and say, "Hey, NCAA, we need you to regulate this. Please regulate this for us." And the NCAA is going to be like, whoa, wait a minute. You didn't want us to do this for so long. But yeah, it's crazy. We'll see. I mean, obviously it's the ripple effects are still being had over the course of NIL, right? I mean, it's insane, the NIL valuation, and my biggest thing is, like, I just hope that players aren't being taken advantage of, which in the case of Sluka, depending on who you believe, sounds like that may have been the case. I'm not really sure, but I just hope the players aren't being lied to or taken advantage of, and that they are also getting their fair share of whatever they deserve. So it's a bit of a weird situation with NIL, but very bizarre. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts beyond that, Kevin.
It's the Star Wars thing, right? The help the NCAA, you're our only hope.
Yeah,
type thing. And so, I'm 100% with you. The NCAA basically said, you know what? You guys are always railing on us, whatever. We're putting our hand up. You guys, it's the wild, wild west. Have a good time with this. And Obviously, it wasn't going to continue to go that way. I think some people had sort of a Pollyannish, I guess, view of what they thought NIL could be. Your star shooting guard has a big game, and so he gets a sponsorship from the Mad Greek there in town, or he goes over to Jack on a Honda or whatever, and has a little commercial, helping to sell cars. And of course, I think people who had a realistic view of it said, "Hey, this is going to be people finding a way to legally funnel money to players in the ways that a lot of places were previously doing off the books." And so it's kind of the Wild West right now. I think part of the issue too, Nick, is with a total lack of oversight, a lot of people don't know what's real. They don't know what guys are actually making. It's not a forced reporting thing. And so you hear insert 5-star quarterback here is making $3 million to go to this school. Well, is he really making $3 million to go to that school? What's the going rate for a starting shooting guard in basketball? Without a sort of mandatory reporting thing, we don't even know where to start, what the market value is on this. And I think without the NCAA's involvement, boosters are going to look at this and try and decide what the market value is. And once people start to decide that, I think it could be a little less wild when people start understanding, okay, this is the price range for a 4-star strong safety type of deal. I think that will help along with it, but I do think that people kind of need the NCAA to hop in and get involved to a greater extent for sure.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you thought NIL was going to be, I promise you, it has become this ungodly monster of probably some people's worst nightmares, I think, in some cases. But in other cases, people say, hey, look, it levels the playing field. Now, smaller schools, if they have the money, if they have the boosters that want to fork up, the cash, they have a chance to maybe get some players that they otherwise might not have been able to get in the previous era of college athletics. So it is something to keep an eye on, and I'm sure more dominoes will fall in that area. Okay, let's turn to KU here. Obviously, paid. This is a paid podcast.
Sure.
We got a little derailed there at the start. Sorry, that was my fault. My bad. My apologies. KU football. It's they are sitting at 1-3. They got their opening win against Leadenwood, and then it's been bad, obviously, since then. Kansas has given away fourth quarter leads in all 3 of their losses. They've had over a 90% chance to win in all 3 of the games that they've lost, by the way. We talked about that after the West Virginia loss. So it's not great. Talked about how the season was teetering heading to the West Virginia game. Where I stand now is like, go win a bowl, go make a bowl game, I guess, at this point. They're welcoming in TCU to Arrowhead Stadium. There's a lot to sort of absorb with that. Like, what's the fan support going to be at Arrowhead Stadium? The weather, by the way, should be absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
It'll be, high 70s, sunny, should be great weather. So we'll see, if KU fans are able to come out and support KU. Lance Leipold gave a quote earlier in the week talking about how important fan support is. Obviously, I think that relationship is a bit tenuous between the Leipolds and the fans in some cases. But we'll see what happens with that. And then obviously, really the bottom line is the product on the field. That's obviously what KU fans care about, and it hasn't been pretty so far this season. And you're welcoming in an interesting TCU team that has a couple of bad losses of their own over the past couple of games they played. They were up, They were up 3 scores on UCF, I believe, at home, and blew it late to lose by 1. And then you have the rivalry game against SMU that was just absolute chaos. Joshua throws for over 400 yards, but they had like 5 turnovers. SMU, they outgained SMU by over 100 yards, but SMU had a fumble 6 and a pick 6 and ends up winning 66-42. So just TCU comes in equally in a chaotic situation as Kansas is, maybe to a different level. But just what are your initial thoughts heading into this game, Kevin? I mean, is the season cooked if KU loses this game against TCU?
I don't know if it's cooked, but I will make a slight adjustment to what you said. Just go make a bowl game. I'll say just win a ball game. And I know that's
true.
I know that sounds crazy or whatever. But I'm not even saying that necessarily in a negative way. I'm saying right now, everything is kind of rolling downhill, right? There's almost an avalanche. And the way the West Virginia game went, it almost feels worse than if you would have just gotten run off the field because you had an 11-point lead. It was like, okay, here it is. Here's the win. The time that they hold on to a fourth quarter lead and wind up winning that game. And it wound up being another fourth quarter collapse. Brian Borland today talked more about what we heard from Lance Leipold earlier in the week in terms of, hey, we're trying to put the players in those situations in practice where it's end of half, it's end of game. You need to execute in these situations to win. And I really do think so often, especially when you're talking about 18 to 22-year-old kids, things are about momentum. And when the momentum is going the right way, sometimes you can pull out games that you really don't have any business winning. And I think when it goes the other way, you can find a way to lose games that you really don't have a lot of business losing. And so that's the big thing to me is forget the bowl game, forget expectations, forget, hey, be 6-3 by this point of the season. No, go out and win the one that's in front of you. Find a way to win this game. And I think even winning one game, Nick, could be pretty important for this team, what ails them right now. Because I think you do have a little bit of nervousness, a little bit of anxiousness. Borland talked about that today as well, where he kind of said guys who have played a lot of football are in situations right now late in games where they're a little bit uptight. And the way to make guys less uptight in those situations is to have the ball bounce your way for once. And so if they go into this game and they lose it, I don't necessarily know that their season's cooked. I do know they need to get back on the winning track so that they can regain that confidence and that feeling that, quite frankly, Nick, they're not that far from having. And what I mean by that is one play a game and Kansas is 4-0. And that sounds like, oh, yeah, he's trying to put a shine on this thing. And I'm really not at all. I think that it's a pretty negative thing that they haven't found a way to win those games. But I do think that it does feel like they aren't far off. And if they can find a way to not lose games at the end of the game, that they could potentially turn some things around for them.
Well, externally, I can tell you there is a lot of nervousness and a lot of anxiousness, I think, from fans. And beyond that, you bring up a great point, though, in that sometimes winning can just cure everything, right?
Yep.
And it feels like maybe KU's in the situation where, people always say, oh, you just need a bounce to go your way, or, Jalen Daniels maybe just needs one throw to get things to click. And that all may be true, but the bottom line is, I think as a team, they just need a win. They just need to have that winning feeling again, really.
Yeah.
Of closing out a game, getting a win, regardless of the opponent, who cares? Just having that winning feeling.
The Rock Chalk chant in the locker room, like little things like that, I think can get them back on the right track. It was so funny talking to the players and coaches about that first game. I feel like, Nick, they almost felt like it was a fluke, right? Like, hey, so many things went wrong against us with Illinois. We still almost won that game. It was just a couple bad breaks. And I thought it was so interesting, Jeff Grimes talking after that game about how he showed them, hey, you're not executing in practice, and that's what's carrying over in this. But I still think there was a little bit of a semblance of that was just a really fluky loss. Well, then it happened again. And I think at that point you say, okay, like something's kind of wrong here. And I think when Kansas got in that situation against West Virginia, people were chewing on fingernails. And it was getting to the point where those previous games, they were carrying the weight on their shoulders. The quickest way to get that monkey off your back is to finish on top on the scoreboard.
Well, it's like, okay, fool me once with the Illinois game, fine, sure, shame on me. Fool me twice with UNLV, okay, what's going on here? 3 times, now it's a serious problem. And yeah, KU does have a serious problem that they need to fix in closing out late games. And TCU is going to present a very tough challenge. I do want to dive more into TCU, talk more about what we can expect from them and how maybe KU this could be a bounce back game for them, as with the matchup with TCU as well. We're going to talk about all of that coming up next As always, though, we just tell you about our friends at Home Field Apparel. You can get Home Field Apparel over at homefieldapparel.com. If you use the promo code PAYHEAT24, you get 15% off your first order. I've got the Jayhawks script here. I did bust out my Jayhawk joggers as well.
Nice.
I opened the windows, got a little chilly in the evening, threw on those bad boys, and it was awesome. And you could join me in that and having that experience by going to homefieldapparel.com and using promo code PAYHEAT24 to check out 40 plus KU items and also 140 other schools as well. They've got bomber jackets, coaches jackets, they've got hats, all things you can imagine over at homefieldapparel.com. Be sure to check it out. We're back with more coming up next. Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone in any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with your existing contacts with you. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/payheed. That's mintmobile.com/payheed. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/payheed. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
This is the Pay Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer. I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. And by the way, if you'd like an extra $500, you can head to bluewirepods.com/survey and complete the Blue Wire audience survey about you and your podcast listening habits for a chance to win a $500 gift card. The survey will help create a better advertising experience for audiences and in turn help us here on Pay Heat, on the show, and on Kansas City Sports Network. That's bluewirepods.com/survey, where all you have to do is answer some simple questions for a chance to win $500. Be sure to read the full terms and disclaimer, plus complete the survey for a chance to win at bluewirepods.com/survey. The link is also in the show notes of this episode. Okay, like I teased a little bit before we headed into the break, this TCU matchup with KU. TCU comes in at 2-2. They started the year with a back-and-forth win over Stanford that they hung on. Then they beat Long Island, an FCS school. And then again, they got up big early against UCF at home and blew a lead big time. I mean, we're talking about KU blowing leads in the fourth quarter. What TCU did against UCF was arguably much worse. They were up bigger and they still lost, and it was at home. So very, very unfortunate there. Then they play SMU in a rivalry game that, again, like I said earlier, was just absolute chaos. They lose that 66-42. Sonny Dykes gets ejected in the third quarter. By the way, I meant to look into this. If you're a player and you get ejected, you miss the first half of the next game. I don't know if it works the same way for coaches, but I'm assuming probably not. So Sonny Dykes, I'm guessing, will be on the sidelines for the whole game against Kansas. But I thought it was funny. I guess I doubt Sonny Dykes found it very funny, but I certainly did. So, but yeah, TCU 2-2, and they are 0-1 in conference with the loss against UCF as they come into this game at Arrowhead Stadium. Okay, Kevin, let's start with Josh Huber, the quarterback for TCU. Sure. He has been, honestly, really good so far this season for TCU. He's throwing for about a bajillion yards a game. He's thrown for over 350 yards in 3 of TCU's 4 games this season. The one he didn't throw for 350 was against Long Island, which he didn't play the whole game. 402 against UCF, 396 against SMU. He's been really good. And he can run, which I think some KU fans immediately will be like, running quarterback, no. But that's not necessarily maybe what he looks to do, but he's obviously a dynamic passer, and this TCU offense has some really talented pass catchers as well. What do you make of how KU will try to slow down TCU when they come to Arrowhead?
Yeah, I think you could make an argument. Everybody talks about Shedeur Sanders, and he's obviously been great, but Josh Huber's been right there with him, in terms of passing efficiency. I think he's a little bit ahead of Shedeur. I think in terms of passing yards per game, he's a little bit ahead of Shedeur as well. And so you're talking about a guy that at least early on this season has been one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, if not the best quarterback in the Big 12. And I'm glad you brought up the weapons that they have. Jack Besh, one of their wideouts, Savion Williams is a real pain. Eric McAllister. They've got a lot of those guys. And I think when you look at what Kansas did against West Virginia defensively, where they struggled with explosive plays, one of the things that Brian Borland said today, Nick, was guys are going to have explosive plays against you. It's football. Coaches love saying the other guys are on scholarship too. But what Borland was saying was that KU needed to do a better job of making sure that the explosives that KU gets hit with are because the other guy makes a play, not because KU is giving it to him. He actually brought up a tennis analogy of a double fault, somebody serving into the net twice. You don't want to make the mistakes that lead to those. And I think it sounded like Borland was pretty confident about Kansas's secondary and saying, hey, if these guys play their A game, then we can hang in. He did say TCU has some really good wide receivers, and Hoover is a guy that excels at getting the ball to him. I'm glad you brought up, stylistically, he's not much of a runner. If he escapes, then he's somebody that escapes typically with the aim of, I'm going to buy myself a couple more seconds to throw the ball down the field, as opposed to the Sluka and Garrett Green that we've seen the last couple weeks, where if they escaped it was to run. And so that part is a little bit different. But the other thing that's kind of an undersold part of this passing attack, Nick, is Hoover hasn't had to escape very often because TCU's only allowed 2 sacks so far this year. And so the pass protection for him has been really good as well.
Yeah, and that's the area that I think is most concerning for KU heading into this game, because it's got to have been shown that even if he had Tony Black, Noah Dots on the outside, and OJ Bones up top, if you can't generate a pass rush, those guys can't cover forever, right?
Yep.
Seen that on display in a couple of different games that KU has lost over the course of this 3-game losing streak. But I do think a potential secret weapon in this game for KU could be By Job.
Yeah.
People forgot a little bit about By Job. Obviously, he was a highly touted recruit, goes to Michigan State, comes to Kansas in the spring transfer portal before Bryce Foster, but he was another big addition that KU added in the spring transfer portal. And he was dealing with a wrist injury for the majority of fall camp. The times that we got to see him during fall camp, he had a club on his hand, and that I think kind of limited him a little bit. And we didn't really get to see him too much through the first couple of games for Kansas, but he played a little bit more in their most recent game against West Virginia. And I think he could be a potential secret weapon in this game against TCU, because Kansas is going to have to generate a pass rush. And I think as much as the coaches hyped up and talked about Dean Miller through the offseason and into fall camp, it's just not there right now. He's just not making enough plays, really. And he looks, to be quite honest, he looks tiny out there. It's just an issue of, I'm not saying Dean Miller is a bad player, but it's just, if you can't maintain a certain weight level on the outside, you're just going to get pushed around at this level. So it's just not working. So I think By Job is a guy to potentially keep an eye on in this game. DJ Warner has gotten a lot of run as well, but Kansas is going to have to find a way to generate some pass rush. Jeremy Robinson's pressure rate has actually been pretty good. If you look at Pro Football Focus's numbers, same with Dylan Woodkey. But they need more from that other side, whether it is Dean Miller stepping up, whether it's By Job injecting in some pass rush, whether it's DJ Warner maybe making a play or two. They need more from that, and this is a game where they desperately need more from that. Otherwise, I fear Josh Hoover could really pick apart this KU defense.
Yeah, and I'm glad you made that point. Pro Football Focus grades or whatever. People have a lot of issues with the grades themselves. But if you look at the snap counts, you had Dean Miller up here, you had Dylan Woodkey here, and Woodkey played more than DJ Warner and By Job combined. I think they combined for something like 19 snaps. I think he played about 23. But, and granted, it's a small sample size, but By Job had a higher grade than Dylan Woodkey did, and DJ Warner had a higher grade than Dean Miller did. And I'm not saying, hey, they're better than those guys. Again, sample size and everything. But I also think with the youth of those guys, with the talent of those guys, it maybe makes sense to slide a few more snaps kind of that way toward those guys where they can get out there and potentially have a chance to impact games as well. You talked about the defensive ends. The defensive tackles has actually been where Kansas has gotten the majority of its pressure at this point. That's obviously vastly different than it was a year ago. And Borland talked about, hey, we don't have an Austin Booker that we can just chalk up 7 or 8 pressures a game from one individual guy and say, hey, this guy is going to carry our pass rush. But he did say that each of the guys that they play are capable of having those pass rush sort of moments where they can get into the backfield and make something happen. I thought the blitz was effective against West Virginia when you look at what they got from a pass rush standpoint from J.B. Brown. In particular, you mentioned By Jobe almost had a sack, kind of scared Garrett Green into Blake Harrell, who got the sack. And so when you look at all of that, I do wonder, hey, is one of and or both of By Jobe or DJ Warner, are they due for more snaps here over the next few weeks as Kansas continues to kind of build out that pass rush?
One other thing to keep an eye on is the injury to Cordell Wheeler. That's Leipold talked about earlier in the week. He got hurt, kind of came back in the game, and actually ended up being a part of giving up a touchdown on a play, and then came out of the game once again. That's something to keep an eye on, because if Cordell Wheeler is not 100% or unable to go, that could really shift around KU's defensive approach, right? Lance Leipold mentioned that maybe Tywan Berryhill might be taking over the green dot because Cordell Wheeler had been the green dot guy before getting hurt. So depending on his status, that could be something to keep an eye on also. But listen, the reason we're talking so much about this TCU passing offense and KU on the pass rush is because TCU is abysmal rushing the football. They have been worse than terrible. I mean, these boys stink at running the ball, and they really abandon it pretty quickly. You look at their last 2 games, only 58 yards rushing against UCF, and they follow that up against SMU with 65, less than 3 yards per carry in both those games. For TCU, they have an interesting star running back, or I shouldn't say star, but a guy that they thought was going to be a star, Cam Cook, that has really not panned out. So this is a game where I would expect, if TCU was unsuccessful running the ball early in the game, I would think they're probably just going to abandon it again and lean into the passing game. And so that's where this KU pass rush becomes so much more important, is that if TCU is not even going to bother trying to run the ball, then you should be able to pin your ears back and hopefully try to generate some disruptive plays as TCU just tries to sling it all around, which I think they might do. So,
well, and you talked about abandoning it a little bit and the lead that they lost against UCF. It's hard to close out games when you can't run the football, and I think that even if this is a game where TCU jumps up a couple scores, I think it's worth hanging around if you're a Kansas fan. Just because if you're looking for a team that's going to take a UNLV-type 9-minute drive and kind of run out the clock while running the football, TCU isn't really that team, and so you maybe have a chance to hang around a little bit better in those situations.
Well, and that's why, transitioning to the offense, that's why I think this game against TCU maybe is the perfect opportunity for Kansas to get right. We talked about getting a win. This matchup against TCU maybe kind of lines up for KU to be able to do that, because when you look at the offensive side of the ball for Kansas and the defensive side of the ball for TCU, obviously we know about KU struggles offensively with Jalen Daniels, with Jeff Grimes and the play calling. They tried switching it up, doing some different things. And TCU's running defense is almost as bad as its rushing offense. They have been terrible in stopping the run on the other side of the ball. And so this is a game where if you're looking for an opportunity for Kansas to maybe get right offensively, this might be it, because you're going to have the chance to feed Devin Neal and Daniel Highshaw and establish the run game against a TCU defense that has proven to be porous, and that can only serve to help Jalen Daniels if he has a complimentary run game, and then maybe he can make those couple throws that can get him going and really spark this Kansas offense.
Yeah, and Sonny Dykes even mentioned that. I think he said, hey, KU's running the ball quite a bit so far. They'll probably run the ball even more against us. And so when you look at that, Nick, talking about the get right game, I think if you're talking about defensively, hey, what does Kansas struggle with? I think it's not just a running quarterback. I think it's the threat of a running quarterback, basically having to account for this guy can run at any time. They've struggled with the quarterback is run, but they've also had to defend in a way to say, we don't want to get hurt by this running quarterback. And so taking that off the table on one side of the ball and on the other side of the ball saying, what does KU want to do? They want to run the ball. You're playing a team that doesn't stop the run super well. At least from those matchup standpoints, it does seem to fit Kansas fairly well. The one thing I'm interested in seeing is TCU is fairly big with their wide receivers. Kansas's corners, they have some length, but they're also a little bit slender. I'm interested to see how the physicality of that matchup between those guys match up. TCU right now, Nick, they're converting almost 53% of their third downs. So, and we all know Sonny Dykes is one of those coaches that, hey, if you're in 4th and 2, they're going for it. So I do think that will be something that will be interesting to watch. Will KU be able to get off the field on third down and not put TCU in situations where they can go for it on 4th down? The flip side of that, though, Nick, is TCU is allowing almost 47% conversion rate on the other side. And so TCU is a team that you can keep their defense on the field a little bit and potentially build some confidence that way as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, the greatest counter to an offense that is converting and explosive and wants to go for it on 4th down a lot is to just play ball control, right? And I think this is a game where Kansas should be able to do that for some of the reasons that you outlined there. And listen, I have been, generally speaking, defending Jeff Grimes, I would say. Like, I've definitely not been somebody who has said, hey, we need to fire Jeff Grimes, because I think that's kind of ridiculous 4 games in. But, and I think the West Virginia game, and I think you agree with me a little bit, Kevin, on this, the West Virginia game was arguably one of the best games the offense has had this season. Like, they gained over 400 yards. They moved the ball. Like, outside of that last drive where they just ran HB dive 3 times and punted immediately, which kind of did cost them the game a little bit, and the defense could have gotten a stop too. But outside of that last drive and outside of the Jalen Daniels early interception, the offense played pretty well, I thought, really. Like, they looked a lot better, obviously, than what, compared to what they'd done previously. And so coming in this game against TCU, I think you have a chance to build on that with the running game. The one thing I want from Jeff Grimes, if you're listening, I'm talking to you, Jeff. This is me speaking directly to Jeff.
Can we zoom in the camera real quick on Nick?
Jeff, speed option, Jeff. Run the speed option, okay? Jalen Daniels, if he's going to suck as a thrower, use his legs. Let him run the speed option, please. I'm begging you. Run the speed option with Devin Neal, with, you can even run triple option. Hand it off to Daniel Highshaw or pitch it to Devin Neal, whatever. Please. More option plays with Jalen Daniels, because if he's just going to be terrible throwing the ball, utilize his legs. He's shown that he can be very effective with that, going back to the UNLV game. So please run the option. Just please do that. That's the one thing I'm asking from Jeff Grimes here in this game against TCU, because I think it's a great chance to really exploit a TCU defense that is already bad against the run, and you have a chance to really exploit that and maintain ball control and slow down the TCU offense, give your defense chances to rest and so on and so forth. But that's the one thing I want to see. I want to see speed option, triple option. Give me all the option plays, okay? All of them. Okay. People may Jeff, we need to clarify here, Jeff. I'm still speaking to Jeff, by the way. Jeff, we need to clarify something. When I say option, I understand that RPO has a run pass option. That's not what I mean. Don't do many of that. We don't need a lot of that stuff. We need speed option, triple option, read option, right? Okay. One of the actual pet peeves I have about Jeff Grimes, I will say, is, and Kevin, he's talked about this a number of times. He has made an emphasis through this preseason and fall camp, and even in the end of the season, of talking about utilizing Devin Neal and Daniel Highshaw at the same time. And to be quite frank, we haven't seen much of that, utilized in games. I don't really know why that's the case. You're 1-3. If you're trying to save something, bust it out now. Use it now. Get them out, get them both on the field. Try something, with both those guys. That's my other thing I want to say about Jeff Grimes. If you're going to keep talking about using Devin Neal and Daniel Highshaw at the same time, let's see it, man. Let's see it. We're 1-3. If there's ever a time to use it, if you think you're holding anything back, now's the time to do it.
The only thing I would say about that is, obviously, you weren't going to show it against Lindenwood.
Yeah, and then David
Highshaw was out against UNLV. So
no, I get it.
So there were, but I'm right there with you in that's something I would like to see, more of heading through it. And I think, to your point, Jeff Grimes talked with us today, and one of the things that he said was, Jalen Daniels and the receivers are continuing to get on the same page, basically. And he talked about kind of how Jalen not having played a whole lot, that's a process that they're continuing to mold or whatever. While that's going on, it makes a lot of sense to do things that Jalen's really good at and really comfortable with. And I think against West Virginia, when you look at the speed option and the way he was able to run it, Nick, with a lot of savvy, it's one thing for a quarterback to just be fast, right? And just say, screw the option, I'm keeping this thing. I think Jalen has a savvy to it where he understands, I'm going to hold this ball till this moment and then pitch this thing or make my decision off of this. It's not even necessarily just that he can hurt people with his legs. He has a legitimate understanding for how to run the option and a sense of timing and the things that go with that. And so I do think that that's something that's really effective. I think, not to keep going back into previous weeks, but I keep seeing the tweet, basically, I'm really mad at Jeff Grimes for running the ball to the same side 3 times. And it's like, no, you're not. You're angry at him for doing it on 3rd and 4, right? Like if he would have done it on 1st down and then run it on 2nd down and it's 3rd and 4, you wouldn't have had any problem with that because you're running down some clock. You're setting up a makeable 3rd down. There's no issue with the 2 plays there. I think what a lot of people would have liked to see, what you and I have talked about, I'm pretty sure we talked about it on air in our post-game thing. If they had run speed option to the wide side on 3rd and 4, it's that one play call, right? Like it's not all 3 downs. It's 3rd and 4 that people have an issue with. And so in that situation, know where your bread is buttered. And where I think they've been so effective was with the speed option. And it wasn't sort of something where they'd been running it well and then West Virginia found an answer for it. West Virginia is sitting in Morgantown right now. They still don't know what the hell the speed option is. So it's I realize, after showing that TCU is probably going to put some time on the speed option this week, I still think it's a strength because of the way Jalen runs it. It's a chance after the snap to make the defense wrong, where they can have the exact right play call, and you can still just have a guy make a play. Like, a guy drifts too far in, Jalen decides to keep, and he makes a play even with the defense being set up for it, or he makes a pitch at the right moment. And so speed option is something that, I would like to see and would have liked to really see in that 3rd and 4 situation.
Well, look, we have reached a point, we reached this point actually really like 2 weeks ago. We've reached a point in the Jeff Grimes discourse where if KU makes a good play offensively, everybody's going to say, oh, great play, Jim Zabrowski. Great job, Jim Zabrowski. And when a play goes wrong, it's, oh my God, just this Jeff Grimes guy sucks. Like, it's just how it is, right? Like, it's okay. I've accepted it. It's fine. I understand. If things go wrong, it's Jeff Grimes' fault. If things go right, it's Jim Zabrowski.
I posted the Luke Graham end around on Twitter because, the day after the game, I'll usually post a few clips like, hey, so you can see what went right or wrong on these plays. That end around to Luke Graham, that was a touchdown, was gorgeous. It was beautiful. It was perfectly executed. You had linemen basically taking naps on the way through because they didn't even have guys to block because it was so perfectly run. And I posted that thing, and the first several comments were basically ripping on Jeff Grimes' performance, from the game. And it's kind of like, okay, like that was a beautiful play call and a, perfectly timed, well executed. It's not 100% black and white that, hey, whatever Jeff Grimes does is bad, and whatever happens that's good came from some external force somewhere else. But I do think when the last play that people remember, I mean, obviously they had the final drive that wound up being the strip sack, but on the penultimate drive, having that 3rd and 4, that's what people remember and circle and say, hey, it's Jeff Grimes' fault that we're losing all these games. Nick, they averaged 6 yards a play against West Virginia. I mean, that was a game that I'm not saying the offense didn't have faults. I'm not saying Jeff Grimes called a perfect game, but I am saying that if you're looking for fault, Jeff Grimes should be pretty far down that list on that game.
Yeah, and look, Jeff Grimes is not going to be fired. He's not going to be fired today. He's not going to be fired tomorrow. He's not going to be fired next week. He's just not going anywhere. And if the quicker you just accept that, I think it'll probably make you happier as a KU fan. That's the route that I've chosen to go down. I have chosen to just accept it. It is what it is. He's been not great probably through the first 4 games, but he's not been the sole reason that KU is 1-3. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm just going to let it ride. I've continued to say this. I think I've said it here on the show. I've said it, off air as well, is that I don't think Jeff Grimes is a bad coach. Like, I don't think he's just a terrible coach. I just think that him coming into the situation with KU, I mean, he's walking into a locker room with a group of players and coaches that have been established together, that have worked together for a very long time. That's really been Lance Leipold's MO. And then here comes a new guy bringing in some new ideas. And it's clearly the mesh between, okay, this is what we did with Andy Kotelnicki that was successful versus, hey, this is what Jeff Grimes wants to kind of implement from the outside. The mesh point there obviously has not been very smooth, okay? And Jalen Daniels being bad for the most part also has not helped that mesh point either. But I continue to believe that Jeff Grimes is not an idiot. I don't think he's stupid. I don't think he's a bad coach. It's just that it just hasn't quite meshed the way that I think you would have liked to have, considering the experience you have on the field with the players, and also guys like Jim Zabrowski, who you would think would make that transition more seamless because of the fact that he has worked well with the players as well. So that's all I really wanted to say about Jeff Grimes. That's fine. Oh, but other than that, run the speed option. Also, please do that. But yeah, beyond that, I actually do think, like I said, sort of to kick off this whole discussion, I do think this is kind of maybe a good opponent for KU to have at this point in the season, considering that they're 1-3, because this TCU game to me lines up as an opportunity for KU to get right